Hello, in this video, I'll show you how to add chapter markers to an MP4 video. We'll look at 3 different ways of doing this: embedding the chapters inside the MP4 file itself, shipping a separate WebVTT file alongside it, and handing the chapter data to a player that knows what to do with it. And then towards the end, I'll show you how the ImageKit Video Player SDK handles all of this with a single prop. Let's start with what chapters are. A chapter is 3 things: a start time, an end time, and a title. Let's take a look at where that data lives. First, the data is embedded in the container. The markers get written into the MP4 file itself, so the file describes its own chapters. This is what you're seeing when you open a movie in VLC and get a chapter list. The second is delivered alongside the video. A separate sidecar file, usually VTT, that the player loads and renders. YouTube, Vimeo, and most web players work this way. So let's start with the first approach, which is embedding the chapters into the MP4. There are 3 tools that cover almost every case here: MP4 chaps, MP4 box, and FFmpeg. The first 2 take a plain text file, and as you can see, it's very simple. Just one line containing a timestamp and title. With MP4 chapters, you name that file after your video, put it in the same folder, and run a single import command. MP4 box wants the chapter file passed in explicitly, so it's the same idea with one extra flag. FFmpeg uses its own format called FF metadata. It's more verbose, but it round trips well through a re-encoding pipeline, which is usually why you'd choose it. Each chapter block declares a time base, a start, an end, and a title. The time base of 1/1000 means those numbers are milliseconds. So the value on screen here is 2 minutes and 26 seconds, which matches the text file we just looked at. Then you remux the file to attach them. And notice the codec copy flag there. That means there's no re-encode happening. It's only rewriting the container, so it finishes almost immediately. Now if I open that file in VLC, the chapters are right there. But if I open exactly the same file in a browser, there's nothing. Browsers don't expose container level chapters through the HTML video element. Chrome, Firefox, and Safari all ignore them. Container chapters are useful when the file leaves the web. For example, a download, a desktop player, or editing timeline. But they're not useful if you're trying to play something through a video tag. There's also an operational cost here. You're modifying the original file. Every re-encode has to preserve or reattach the chapters. Every CDN in front of it needs a cache bust. And your chapter list now lives inside a binary rather than next to the video record in your database. That's fine for one static download, but a headache for a content library. So the web native approach is a WebVTT file loaded as a chapters track. It's the same format you'd use for subtitles, and each cue's text becomes the chapter title. One thing to notice here is that every cue ends exactly where the next one begins. Chapters are contiguous, unlike subtitles, which have gaps between them. You wire it into your video element with a track element and set kind to chapters. Every major browser will parse this file. The cues are available on the media element right now, sitting in memory. But as you can see, the player looks exactly the same as it did before. There are no markers on the progress bar, and there's no chapter button. That's the difference from subtitles. With subtitles, that same track element gives you a full native captions menu. With chapters, you get the data, but no interface. If you do want to render it yourself, you iterate the cues. You set the tracks mode to hidden, which tells the browser to parse the file but not draw it. Then you listen for the cue change event and read the start time, end time, and text from each cue. That line is the key. Without it, the browser will try to render your chapter titles as subtitles. So now you have the data. But turning that into a scrubbable progress bar with hover previews, keyboard navigation, and a jump to chapter menu is a separate project on its own, which is why most JavaScript players close that gap for you. The data format stays the same, just the configuration changes. Video.js has chapter support built into it. The chapters button ships in the default control bar. You give it a chapters track, mark it as default, and the menu appears on its own. No plugin or extra call needed. Player takes a different approach and accepts an inline markers array. So for the simple case, you can skip VTT entirely. Just a time and a label for each marker. The pattern is consistent across players. VTT is the data format, and the player provides the interface. So if you already ship one of these, adding chapters is a configuration change. If you don't, you're now choosing a video player in order to add chapters. And this is really where it gets complex and decisions need to be made. Where does the chapter list live? A file in your bucket, a column in your database, or both? How does it stay in sync when somebody re-encodes or replaces the video? Which player renders the interface, and how much JavaScript does that add to your bundle? And how do you style it? For a marketing site with one feature video, that's a lot of infrastructure for a feature that should only take a few hours. So let me show you how ImageKit handles this. Once you install the video player package, you import the player, then import its style sheet, and finally you pass it a source object with a chapters field on it. The keys are in seconds and the values are the titles. Then you're all set. You may notice there are no end times. The SDK works out where each chapter ends from where the next one starts. So you only ever need to write the boundaries. As you can see, once that's saved, the markers appear on the progress bar. There's a chapter button in the control bar, and clicking a chapter jumps straight to it. And because this is just a plain object, your source of truth stays in your application. Keep it in a database column, a CMS field, or wherever it makes sense rather than it being baked into a binary. Now prop accepts 3 shapes, and moving between them is just a one-line change. The first is the inline object we just looked at. The second is a hosted VTT file. If you already have one, you upload it to ImageKit and pass its URL. It's exactly the same VTT from earlier, except now something actually renders it. And the third is chapters set to true, which hands the job to ImageKit's AI transcription and generates them from the video itself. That is a paid extension, which is 2 units per minute of source video, and that's billed once for subtitles and chapters together rather than per feature. I'll leave a link to the pricing below. So to wrap up, if your video is being distributed for offline or desktop playback, embed the chapters in the container. If you want complete control over the chapter interface, use a raw VTT file and render it yourself. If you already ship Video.js or Plyr, it's a configuration change. And if you'd rather the chapter interface worked out of the box and would like to keep the data in your own application, try out ImageKit's Video Player SDK. Everything I showed you is in the blog and demo repo linked below. If you'd like to add chapters to a video you already have, you can sign up for a free ImageKit account and get started today.